Hey, Walt with mycameragrip.com, and today we're going to start measuring our camera. I've gone to mycameragrip.com, I've registered, logged in, verified my email, and then I can click on My Cameras. And then from there, I can click on New Camera, and I'm ready to start entering measurements for my camera. Before I do that, the first thing I want to do is take my calipers, turn them on, make sure they're reading millimeters, and then zero them out. Like I said before, we don't need to be super precise. Even though that was reading minus 0.02 before, that would have been fine. But it's just a good idea to get in the practice of making sure the calipers are reading millimeters and they're zeroed and the jaws are closed. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is put in our camera make. And so we've got a Panasonic, and it's an LX102. If you look at the camera, the bottom says DC LX100M2. You could put that in as well. I just like to put in, I've got it taped up, but you know, the front of the camera usually will say, actually in this one, this on the top of the camera, it says LX100II. So I like to just put in kind of what the camera is known as commonly. Okay, so after putting in the model, the next thing it wants is the camera width. And anytime we measure the camera, especially when we're measuring the bottom, from the bottom side like this, you want to make sure the camera's on its, upside down with the lens pointing toward you. That puts the left side of the camera on your left, the right side on your right, the back is back here, and then the front is pointing toward you. So we'll start out measuring. Let's see here. Take our calipers. And this camera, if you notice, it has like the grip kind of sticks out from the end of the camera. We don't want to measure that right now. The reason being that that gap from between the bottom of the camera and the bottom of the grip, it's going to be higher than the sidewall of our grip. So we don't want to include that in our measurements. But if we take our calipers, kind of like last time, put it up against the left side, measure over to the right. We kind of snug that up, make sure it's square up near the bottom of the camera, but not not up over the edge. So we do that. We get 114 even. So I'll put that in, 114, and then the next is camera depth. And the camera depth is measuring from the back side of the camera to the front. So we get our calipers kind of squished back down again. And on this camera, like everything, it's pretty straight. So we'll just measure like around here. Put that in. And we get 26.3. I might put in 26.5 or even say 27, just to give us kind of some breathing room between the grip and the camera. And so then next is camera height, and we want to measure that near the shutter button, because this will determine kind of how high our grip will be. So again, we'll go from the bottom of the camera up to the top, take that, and we get 61.2, so I'll do 61. I could go a little higher and say 62 or 63 just to get it up here, but this is your zoom control, so you really don't want to cover that, so 61 is good. Okay, and then the next is lens center X. And on all of these measurements that we're putting in, let me see, if your computer has a wide screen like mine does, I can get the instructions over on the right here. and see them while I'm looking at the field I'm entering. So this kind of helps tell me measure from the left side of the camera to the center line of the lens. And it shows you example with a Nikon camera and actually another Nikon. So we want to do that on this camera. So we'll measure from the left side, and then this camera conveniently has a screw right in the center and a little bump there. So we'll measure to the center of those, and we'll get about 47 millimeters. Okay, and then it asks, is the lens removable? And no, this one's not. And so it wants to know some things about the lens. If we had said yes, then it'd want to know the mount and then the distance from the bottom of the camera body. But so we'll say no on this one. And so now it's at, let's see, let me take that off. I've got the lens hood on there. We'll take that off. And so it wants to know lens max diameter without hood. So that would be over here. This lens has these little kind of tabs on the sides. We can include those and get 64.6. I'll just put in 64. And then it wants to know lens diameter at camera body. So we'll go over here, go to the camera body, measure lens diameter, and get about 60.7. So 61 is good. And then lens minimum length without hood. So on this camera, when you turn it on, the lens will extend, but the shortest it can be is right here when the camera's turned off. So we'll measure that, and we'll measure from this one from the front of the camera to kind of the end of the lens. And it's okay if we go a little beyond that, I guess. You know, it's not super exact. So 28.9, so 29. Okay, got there 29. Now, so lens maximum length without hood. So for this one, we need to turn the camera on. And then, like I said, this camera kind of extends when you zoom. So we'll do that. We'll get the lens to its full length. And again, flip it over and go measure this. And you'll notice for this one, I'm measuring using the inside jaws on the caliper. Just because it's easier, then I can kind of put that up against the camera body. So go from there down to here and measure that at 79.3. So let's call that 79. And then lens distance from bottom of camera body. And this one, so you can see it's flush, there's 0. So we'll call that 0. And then it wants us to measure the lens hood. So we have the lens hood width. So here's the hood. So we'll measure the hood width. And this hood is round, so it doesn't matter really where we measure it. So 69.6, we'll call it 70. And then lens hood height. Well, this one's round, so it's the same. So we can just leave it, and it says, same as width. And then lens hood length. So on this one, I'm going to include the lens cap because it does stick out from the hood, but I'm not going to include these threads back here because they screw into the end of the camera lens, and so we don't need to add those. So yeah, get the calipers on there. Okay, and we've got about 25 millimeters for that. There. So 25. Okay, and that's and we ask for the lens measurements and the hood measurements. That way, if somebody doesn't have a hood, we can deal with that. And these lens measurements, so we're going to make a wall that goes across the front of the camera. That helps hold the camera plate in place. And we need to know if we should kind of make a cutout for the lens or not. So that's why we ask for the distance from the bottom of the camera to the bottom of the lens and the diameter of the lens. And then as far as the rest of the lens measurements, we also have something called a lens plank, which I don't have any example right here, but it can kind of extend out from the bottom from the plate, camera plate, to like help kind of protect the lens from damage. And so that's why we ask for camera measurements. And I think that's it for now. So that's good. We've got kind of the major measurements on our camera done. Thanks.